All right, Mr. Kevin, you are recording.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll try not to screw this up as we get into this. Good afternoon now, task force members. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Kevin Bragg. I'm the Bureau Chief for Professional Licensing here at the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. And today I have the distinct privilege to talk to you about Licensing 101. So if you'll give me just a moment so I can get my screen shared and then we can get started. And Lisa, if you'll verify when this pops up for me.
It's a,
Everybody got a train?
yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Again, I told you I'm Kevin Bragg, I'm the Bureau Chief for Licensing. I've been doing that for about a year and a half. We've got a great team or staff here, about 56 folks who support the work of our state in protecting our citizens. It's very nice to see many of your familiar faces or names. For those of you who are just getting to know, it's great to meet you, and I hope that you're going to find some information that you get today to be useful. If there's anything that spurs up from the presentation, I'd ask for you to just hang tight while I get through it. That way, we've got a little bit of additional time for questions that you may have, or we'll also take a little bit of public comment at the end if people have questions too. You're always welcome to reach out to me offline. My email address is kevin.bragg@mt.gov, or you can reach me at 406-841-2390. But welcome to reach out. Happy to help at any time. To give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a broad overview of what our team does in conjunction with our administratively attached licensing boards and our licensing programs here at the department, and then I'll run you through the application process. I want to be very clear with everybody that's on the task force as well as the public that is on the call today. I'm not going to be advocating for any specific change, so please don't make any assumptions based off what the materials may show or what I may say. My goal is to try and make sure that you walk away with some idea about how we process applications and some of the challenges that we face about during that. The easiest way for me to think about that is with the train, and that's why you've got the train on your screens. For those of us who've taken a train trip or have read about them, maybe you know there are several stops along the way until you get to your final destination. And around here, our final destination is trying to issue a license if that's possible and folks qualify. So with that, let's dig in a little bit. And if you've heard me talk over the last year, some of these slides may look familiar, but I always like to start with the purpose of licensing. And I think most of you have picked up on what that is, but I also like to break down what licensing actually does. And I generally put that into two main areas, which are license issuance and ongoing compliance. I'm going to make a quick pitch here for Quinlan, who's talking next Wednesday at noon about compliance with you. Please come back and listen to him. He can give you some great information and perspective on that. But back to the actual purpose. Licensing exists because specific occupations can harm the public. It's not because the government needs to collect money. The legislature has specifically found that a profession can do harm, and as a result, they believe that licensing is appropriate. Um, The efficient licensing of applicants also increases services for citizens. And so it's important that we get to issuing a license as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. You notice I do not say expediting licensing applications. We try and do that, but we balance that with all of the considerations that we have and variables that we have. And so efficiency for me and for everyone here at the department underneath me assumes that we are acting as quickly as possible, but also in consideration for anything that may pop up, like a disciplinary issue from a previous state or a prior criminal conviction somewhere. Licensing requires that folks meet minimum standards, and I think that that is sometimes difficult for all of us to think about because we want excellent providers. Government cannot create excellent providers. We're here to ensure that everyone meets a baseline level before they start to practice, and that they meet minimum requirements moving forward as far as their conduct during the time of their profession. And so that's kind of broadly how I think about license issuance. For compliance, that is a big component is enforcement. And I know that you have talked about that on previous phone calls, but Quinlan's going to talk about that. So I'll try and stay out of it as much as possible today. They asked me to keep this to 30 minutes. I'm going to do my level best. Just to give you kind of a perspective on some of the boards and programs that we work with, we have 41 licensing programs, and I am using that term broadly. There is an actual distinction between a licensing board and a licensing program, and I'll go through that with you on the next slide. But in total, these 41 programs all have over 233 individual license types with unique qualifications. Our staff here at the department does a great job covering a broad range of license types, especially given the expansion or growth in licensees that we've had over the last decade. And if you've heard Commissioner Swanson speak, she's told you correctly that it's been about a 98% increase in licensing applications as we've had over the last decade. That said, we can always do better, and that's why you, as task force members, are here to help us look at and potentially address some issues that can open up Montana to outside providers or internal providers, as well as expand services for our citizens who we don't want to see penalized because of where they choose to live. So I want to take you through a little bit of the distinction between boards versus programs. And there's two sides for this screen. Each side lines up underneath the title. I like to throw up all the information, then you can read through that. I'm not going to read it for you. But in general, the main distinction in the difference between a licensing board versus a licensing program is who is making the decisions. For licensing programs, department staff do that here. For licensing boards, we have governor-appointed expertise. If you've heard Commissioner Swanson speak, she talks about the three-legged stool, the duties of the department, the boards, and the commissioner. Statute has some language that speaks to each of those and gives duties to each of us, and it's important for us all to respect and work within our assigned areas. We at the department in a licensing program, the right side of your screen, leverage subject matter expertise with contracts with external providers. That's a little bit more agile. It's also a similar operation to what licensing boards do when they need subject matter expertise, specifically in prosecutions, maybe not day to day. So for licensing boards, those members that are members of the profession certainly have expertise that they bring to the table and may be able to do that a little bit more quickly inside a specific meeting. For licensing programs, we are in one large continuous meeting, and so decisions may come a little bit quicker inside of a licensing program versus a board. The other distinction you see there on the bottom left is that there are certain costs that are affiliated with board meetings, as well as some member reimbursements, which are not much. I am very grateful to our licensing board members for the time that they commit to the department and the expertise that they bring to us. Please remember that I am not advocating for one being better than the other, but generally boards are more costly to run than programs. Having said that, I've already told you one of the downsides to that is subject matter expertise is lacking. I am not a medical provider and would not dare claim to make any determination on scope of practice for a medical provider that is underneath a departmental program. We would leverage that expertise outside of the department through contracting. So back to my train analogy, I'm going to stick with it. There's two main qualifying pathways for folks. The first one I really kind of frame out as an examination or an initial pathway, which is somebody that doesn't have a license in another state. They're required to prove out all the requirements that are either in statute or rule in order to obtain their licensure. The converse to that is either endorsement and substantial equivalency, which the legislature was gracious enough to help us with last session in 2025 with House Bill 246. If you are a licensee in another state with an existing license, and it has to be a state, it's not a jurisdiction. So if a license is issued on a municipal level in another state and not licensed at a statewide level, we can't use substantial equivalency to qualify you. So you have to fall back into the original pathway for examination or initial licensure. But substantial equivalency, active license in another state in good standing and no disqualifying issues. I've noted the two main ones that frequently pop up.
I thought at first maybe.
Thank you. The main frequent things that we see up when we talk about disqualifying issues are compliance issues from another state, which pop up on license verifications generally, if not acknowledged by the licensee during the process, and then also criminal history. I'll touch briefly on criminal history. Montana has a specific statute that says a criminal conviction cannot be the sole basis for denying a license. We are very progressive in that sense, and it requires each of the licensing boards and department staff and licensing programs to look at whether or not a candidate is actually rehabilitated, and also whether or not that specific criminal conviction is adjacent to or related to the actual practice. And so if you're coming to Montana and you have a criminal conviction, you are not automatically barred from getting a license. There are certainly disqualifying criminal convictions, but again, they are fully reviewed prior to a determination. So we always encourage folks to apply if they have a criminal history. We try and figure out a way to get people licensed. The next thing that I'm going to go over with you is routine versus non-routine license applications. Routine applications are generally issued by staff without the boards. Same way for a program, staff issue those. The vast majority of licenses that we issue at the Department of Labor and Industry are done by staff. In a routine license application, it means that you meet all the requirements in statute and rule. And so as a result, since you don't have any disqualifying issues, staff are able to issue those licenses, which we are very grateful for that opportunity to do that. That helps us to expedite and be more efficient about how we issue licenses. Non-routine applications, you recall from the prior slide, again, mostly disciplinary history, criminal convictions, sometimes qualifying issues. Those go through a little bit more of a process. And so I'm not going to walk through each of these. That would take too long. And these are general overviews of these actual processes. There are some in-between steps that I don't think are necessarily of note, but that certainly add time. For a non-routine application in general, we are probably looking at adding approximately 90 to 120 days for review. That can be dependent upon a lot of things. So if there's an investigation that needs to be undertaken during an application, that may extend it beyond that 120 days. Or if we have all the information we already need, the board can get together quicker, then we will certainly bring it forward faster than that. But in general, I tell people it's about 90 to 120 days addition if you've got a non-routine application versus a routine application. So take away from this slide and from my talking that non-routine applications take longer to process for a number of reasons, including gathering documentation, meeting schedules, and the level of evaluation that's involved inside of each of those. All right. So instead of walking you through and having to worry about the internet issues, connectivity issues, I've got a video for us to watch of an actual application process. Please keep in mind, I do this frequently. I do not expect licensees to run through it in 6 minutes, but we're going to kind of walk through a license application. This one specifically that I've videoed for you is a chiropractic application. And so in general, for a chiropractor's application, and you'll see this as we go through the slide, I'll talk through it with you. There are a couple of examination requirements, there's educational requirements, and we'll work through how it generally looks for an applicant when they come in. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to our licensing portal and you're going to click in your information. If you don't have that, you can click on Not Registered and set up an account. You can see me struggling to try and remember my password, just like the rest of us. And then once you get into the system, the first thing that it's going to do is going to pop up if you have any current licenses pending or applications pending. And for me, I've got a couple that we test, and this is our test environment. But in order to start one, you're going to click on Start a New License Application. Once you get there, there's a number of disclaimers. Everybody loves a good disclaimer. But there's a couple of important things you need to read through, and then you accept the terms and move on to the next screen. Once you get there, you'll pop up if you're in the healthcare portal with a number of different application types. You can click on them, those buttons expand and show you specific applications. For the chiropractor, we're going to select chiropractor and then hit continue. This takes just a hot moment because it's sorting through those 233 license application types to pull up the chiropractor application. But once it does, it will load up with the specific information after this add your information screen. Instead of taking you through that, I'm just going to select from my existing account, which will pre-populate the information that I've already typed into the system. Once it does that, you'll see it pop up, and then you need to answer whether or not you're a U.S. citizen. If you're not a U.S. citizen, there are some additional application questions that you need to work through. And then it moves on to the next screen where you'll start answering specific questions, such as, are you licensed in a different state? Have you graduated from the appropriate college? Taken the appropriate exams? In Montana, chiropractors have to take parts 1 through 4 of the NBCE, also the physiotherapy exam. And so that's the ones that I marked as far as what we've taken. And then it asks you whether or not you're asking for a provisional permit. Once you get through those initial qualifiers, it takes you to our next screen, which are our personal history questions. These are relatively the same for all of our licensed professions, and what they are getting at is the same things that I've talked to you about, whether or not you have prior disciplinary history or criminal convictions that impact your ability to license. I know the barrier subcommittee is going to look at expungements, I suspect. That is a part of this personal history process. If you would like copies of the actual questions, we're happy to provide those to you. For a chiropractic application, since it's a healthcare provider, it has some additional questions. The goal is to try and be able to mark no to all the questions, which is what I have done so that it's not prompting any of those additional branching logic questions. On the next screen, these are new. They're from our 2025 session. Talk to you about service of process. Licensees can now consent to electronic service of process should they choose. If they don't choose, they'll still be served in the normal way, either through certified mail or somebody showing up at your doorstep. We try not to do that. The next screen allows you to add some attachments. It's generally user intuitive. You can browse and upload things at that time. You can always come back on the back end and upload attachments. We don't expect everybody to get this right the first time that they go into our licensing portal. The next screen shows you the end of the actual application, which is a summary of all the answers that you have made and an opportunity to revise those should you need to by clicking on the edit button. And at the bottom, you'll do an attestation that everything is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. And then you hit enter. And what's going to happen next is the business end, which is we'll move into the payment portal. And I'll show you that. It pops up with the application fee, and currently chiropractors are a part of our contingent litigation fee, so they have an additional fee of $5, which is back from the 2025 session. It's insurance for some of our smaller boards. You can do a bank transfer or pay with a credit card. Most people pay with a credit card. Again, I'm just going to pre-populate some information from our test environment, and then the next screen will show you the payment page. But I've cut it out a little bit. And so you'll move on through, and then you can hit submit payment after you accept the credit card agreement through our third-party provider that we use with the state. What happens next is you get an emailed receipt to you. You'll also get a couple of different letters sent to you that will verify all of the ways that you answered the questions on the application so that if you need to make changes, you can do that with us. This screen that I'm circling at right now talks to you about conditions of approval. Those are basically, here's what you need to do in order to get your license from this point forward. And so you'll see here, there's a couple different ones for the chiropractors. The next thing I'm going to do is show you where you can go back if you need to log out at this point. As long as you've submitted payment, you've started the application process for our license examiners. At the next page, you can go back and click on your application and upload documents at that time or re-review the conditions of approval. So that's how users will be able to go back, and you can see those two additional communications right there at the bottom. That is the fastest that I can take you through a licensing application. I'm not going to walk you through the side that we process here at the department, just because, again, I want to limit your time and focus. But that is generally how folks are applying. The vast majority of our licensing applications are now inside of our Acela portal. They are not in paper form. We are trying to vigorously remove all of the paper forms that we have outstanding and doing a very good job of that. I'd say we're well over 90% of paper forms removed, just because that process then requires some data entry, and we're trying not to duplicate services. So the next thing I want to do is walk you through two specific license type application processes. And again, Kristen's on the call. Please bear with me. These are general overviews of the application process for a registered nurse. And then we're going to look at one for a radiologic technologist. These descriptions do not include every single step, but they include the major steps as we work through them. So the first thing you're going to do is exactly what we just did, which is you'll submit an application. Then it comes to our side of the house at the department. Our staff by law has 10 days to review your licensing application and figure out if there is something deficient. Deficient not being bad, just meaning you're missing something before we can issue you a license. Our internal goal, and I will tell you, is 5 days to try and get that done. Statute allows 10. We try and be well below that just because time to licensure matters, as you may have heard before. People need to get out and start working and making a living. We don't want to be the roadblock to that. The next things that happen are we verify your educational transcripts. Then comes a background check. I'll speak to that more here in just a minute. If something pops up on the background check, we ask for additional information. We make a determination whether or not you're routine or non-routine. If you're a routine applicant, then we approve you in this process for nursing to sit for your examination, and we wait for the exam results. Nursing is a little bit different. They have their own database called NURSIS through their National Council of State Boards of Nursing. And so sometimes that's done a little bit quicker as far as verifying education and transcripts. But once you get to the exam results, we're waiting to see if you pass. If you pass, great, we issue you the license. If you fail, you obviously have to retake the exam, and I believe the provider for the examination is Pearson VUE, I think. And they require you to wait for another 45 days before you can take the license. In general, most of our boards have removed constraints on number of exam attempts and also about dictating specific requirements for when you can take examinations, such as a waiting period from a first failure or a second failure or a third failure. We want to see people pass their exams, but at some point there is an argument to be made about whether or not continuously taking an exam that you are failing means that you're qualified for something. The next one I'm going to show you is a lot more streamlined. It's a radiologic technologist application process. Same thing, you issue or submit the application. What we do, since radiologic technologists have an American Registry of Radiologic Technologists, which is a national certification, we verify their national certification. Once we've done that, we verify if they have any additional state licenses, and then confirm that they don't have any disqualifiers. And if all that lines out, then we issue the license. So you can see that that license process generally is much quicker than the registered nurse application process. I chose those two not for any specific reason. They're just the ones that popped into my head, but I wanted to converse with you a little bit about a longer application process, and then also a shorter one and why those two things are. Again, for radiologic technologists, they have a national certification. One of the things that we've started to see specifically with compacts is background checks, and other license types automatically have background checks as well. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that process and what it looks like. The background check process is a little bit unique because the Department of Labor and Industry does not have any control over the background check process. We will try to get you facilitated with Department of Justice, the State Department of Justice, as quickly as possible, but it really depends on how you go about getting your fingerprints done as to how quickly we can turn around a background check. So it can be a delay in licensure for sure. Once we have someone complete an applicant right and consent form, and what that tells them is they have the ability to contest anything that pops up in a background check, federal requirements. Then they go either to local law enforcement if they are somewhere not close to Helena or out of state, and submit background check or fingerprints, and then we run a background check through the Department of Justice. That has a pretty variable timeline. Again, broadly 4 to 6 weeks is the quickest that you can get that done, just because snail mail takes time, unfortunately. If you come to Helena, which I don't encourage you to have to do this, but you can get it done a lot quicker if you have your fingerprints taken at the physical Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigations building over on 11th Avenue. That process averages about 1 to 2 weeks. Those results are sent to the department, to our department at Labor and Industry, and reviewed inside of a locked room with a limited access computer. So the results aren't sent snail mail. It's just the fingerprint cards that may lengthen the process. Once that happens, one of our license examiners, our 20 license examiners, goes and reviews those for any disqualifying results. Some background checks, many background checks come back and say there's nothing out there. And so at that point, our license examiner notes in the record that there are no disqualifying convictions, and then moves on to the next step, which is hopefully issuing of the license, or as you saw in the nursing application process, it's to go and take your exam. Some other common delays that I want you to be aware of, and again, I know I'm buttoned up on my 30 minutes. It's hard to keep me to 30, as everybody knows around here. License verifications. We try to focus here at the department on things that we can control. So if there are digital databases that other states are using, similar to the one that the state of Montana has with licensee lookup, we will go and pull license verifications on our own. Having said that, if you have a licensee who has licenses in 50 states, all 50 states, which some do, we have to verify every single one of those licenses before we can issue them a full license. We do have the ability to issue provisional licenses, but we still need to do verifications. Verifying 50 state licenses can be timely or take time. And there are also other states that still manually process license verifications. They charge for them. We don't charge for them here. And they also only issue paper verifications. And some of those things will actually delay time to licensure significantly, depending upon how responsive the other states are. Transcripts, there's lots of large repositories now, and we have subscriptions with some of those where we can go and pull transcripts for specific license types. Again, if it's something that my staff can pull on their own, we do that. But there are certain ways that we can't get transcripts without having somebody submit those to us. It's a little bit less tedious, probably isn't the right word, but time intensive if you've got an out-of-state licensee. If they're licensed in another state, again, with substantial equivalency, we don't necessarily have to verify transcripts because they have already got a qualifying license in a different state. But we still check their criminal convictions and disciplinary history. Exam results and approvals, those things take time. They're with third parties. Sign-offs can take time, specifically if there's a sub-licensee that needs to get a sign-off from a master licensee, that can sometimes delay. as well as supervisory hour requirements. And that bleeds into the next thing I'll put up on the screen, which is forms. Um, we try not to require specific forms um, just because we really want the substance, not necessarily the form dictated. And so we gather as much information as we can in appropriate manners and then issue the license if we can. But sign-offs and forms are another reason. Obviously, background checks take time, but criminal justice information, specifically for like the barrier subcommittee, if you're talking about folks who have criminal convictions, it takes time to get through to the clerk's office and get information so that you can provide it to us here at the department so that we can review it. So that can cause delays in licensure, especially if you've got issues in multiple jurisdictions. Disciplinary records, there are a lot of large national repositories, National Practitioner Data Bank, where we can pull some information. We still verify licenses, so making sure we're not duplicating, but grabbing disciplinary records from other states sometimes requires cooperation, and we do that as quickly as we can. With that, this is my last slide, I promise you, before I'll open it up to task member questions or task force member questions. The QR code that's at the top of the screen will take you to our interested parties list. I encourage anybody that's on the call that wants to know more about what's going on here at the department with any of our licensing boards or any program that the Department of Labor and Industry has to sign up for our interested parties list. There's my information. And then if you've got a pending application, our customer service team is 9 very dedicated employees who are here to help walk you through or answer questions that you may have. So I want to get that information out there before I give you some takeaways. Takeaways are, it's a 3-player game, specifically with licensing boards. It could be a 2-player game if it's the department. And I don't mean a game as in it is flippant. I mean, think about it like a game. It requires the licensee, department staff, and then also the board when you're talking about boards or the department and the licensee. I can't process or we can't process an application any quicker if we don't have the information and can't find access to get it some other way. So we really are at times hindered by the ability of the person on the other side of the phone. And that works both ways, not only for applicants, but also for our staff to try and get and supply information. All 233 of those license types have specific unique qualifications. Most of the delays that we face are not unique. And so it's important to try and find some standardization in processing, specifically with requirements for licensure from our licensing boards or programs. Trying to find that standardization is important because my staff shouldn't need to pick up 24 different books or 41 different books, depending upon if it's a program too. We really want to try and keep our limitations down and find some unique answers. And the legislature was helpful with that in the 2025 session, trying to come up with some specific simple answers that apply across the board. And so we're very grateful for that. Certifying bodies can be an alternative to licensing. We would really like to see with certifying bodies that they have some disciplinary component to them as well, but national certifications are also an alternative to licensing should the legislature or others choose to look at those. Non-routine applications can take a significant amount of time and delay folks from getting licenses. Board meetings can delay applicants in the same way for licensing programs. Gathering information can delay. Avoiding non-routine applications is hopefully something that we can do, but at the time that we need to spend some time talking and evaluating a candidate, we're going to do that to make sure that we're not unleashing somebody on the public that doesn't need to have a license. And the last one I'll leave you with is always my takeaway, which is requirements should evolve. I don't mean it to be flippant, but I am not licensed as a lawyer in this state. Let me get that caveat out there. But when I took the bar exam, it was done on Blue Books. And they've certainly evolved in how they administer that as well as the education requirements. We need to have licensing boards and department staff evaluating whether or not requirements can evolve or are taken care of elsewhere so that we're not duplicating services and delaying folks' time to licensure. So with that, I have run myself over by 5 minutes. I apologize for taking up that much time, but if there are task force member questions, I'll be glad to entertain those right now. And then I'll move into questions from the public after we get through our task force members. Go ahead, Webb.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. Very good overview. And I've asked this question before, and I know it might take some time and we'll get the answer eventually, but I do want the answer. How many license applications are ultimately and finally denied? Obviously, I know, if there's unusual circumstances, all the rest you've explained, it sometimes takes a long time. But do you have a sense right now, or are we going to get that information? And the reason here is the premise is that licensing may be preventing some people from getting into the workforce. And I'm not seeing that, but if you got the data, I'd love to see that either now or later. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Webb. Great question. We'll be glad to get you the data on how many licenses we ultimately end up denying versus the number that we grant. Far and away, we grant way more licenses than we deny. It's the timeliness that I think can also become an issue, and I think part of the thing that you all are tasked with looking at, but we'll be glad to get you that information so that you can evaluate that.
Thanks.
Yes, Jen, go ahead.
Thanks for the thorough overview, Kevin. I do appreciate it. And I am also, again, impressed by the ability of this division to basically double their workload in a decade and really not double their employees. There's some economy of scale, but there also has been a lot of efficiencies realized by having to make that staff lean. And I do want to acknowledge the hard work being done there. I heard one potential bottleneck when it came to approving applications, and that is a board meeting, right? So obviously, y'all aren't meeting every week, sometimes quarterly, sometimes longer than that. And that, I think, is a necessary conversation point. But are there other places you can identify right away, knowing this process in and out, where you just know that this is going to be there for 10 days before it gets squished through the process, more likely than not? And whether that's a paper pushing issue or waiting to get fingerprints results back or anything, can you give us those examples?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Broadly, and I think they talked about this for what was Friday's committee. Anyways, they talked about this on Friday, and so we're going to get you a list of hiccups.
I think
that
Friday was construction.
Thank you. At the construction committee, they asked specifically for delays that we see here at the department. I am working with staff to get that compiled and provide that. We'll certainly do that for any other areas too. For non-routine applications, there's a couple of different levels of evaluation. You have evaluation through the license examining staff. And then you would have an escalation to an executive officer for review to sort of try and see if that we can issue the license still as routine. At the point that we cannot, then it goes over to our legal folks for their evaluation and potential investigation. So those add delays. It's not just specifically board meetings. Again, I don't want to throw it all on boards. That's not the case. It's gathering of information that's necessary in order for either the licensing boards or program staff to evaluate whether or not they can move forward with the application through the screening panel process. And Quinlan may have some other ideas about that next week in compliance. Of course, this last legislative session, we moved everything as far as application review from our full boards to our screening panels with the hope that they would meet quicker, but certainly can get you some more information about other delays that we have. And it's certainly not, and I don't want anybody to leave with the thought of it's the fault of our board members. Our board members are very gracious and giving of their time, and we're very thankful for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Zolnikoff.
Thank you, and thanks for that presentation. So I was curious, is there any things we could swap around where while this paperwork's going, the license is granted? Maybe you sign something to say there's no problems here, and then some of it gets going so the individual's not waiting for paperwork, they can get going. And then if something comes out, then uh, then you withdraw it instead of, assuming innocence instead of guilt.
Sure. Great question, Senator Zolnikoff. I think I saw Jennifer Stallcamp's face on this call. And I'm not going to abdicate everything to her, but I do want her perspective on that. We have the ability to issue provisional licenses. But again, I would want one of our capable lawyers to advise us about how to approach issuing a full and unrestricted license, I guess, in lieu of a provisional while we do those verifications. I certainly, one of the constant things that I am thinking about are license verifications. Like I mentioned, if somebody has 50 license verifications to pull, that is very time intensive. And if there's a way to avoid that, I would like to, but I also, again, am very hesitant to unleash somebody out on the public. But Jennifer, have you got anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for the question, Senator Zolnikoff. It's a good one. We do have statutory authority to issue provisional licenses, and where that comes up pretty regularly is if we're waiting for exam results, we're waiting for verifications from other states, and we know the applicant is in good standing. We're just waiting for one last piece of paperwork. We can issue the license, and then when that paperwork comes through, just convert it to a full and unrestricted license, or alternatively, if somebody was expecting to pass their test and doesn't, we have a way of retracting the license so that we don't have someone unqualified out there practicing.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking if there's little things like that, just you guys are the experts, but appreciate the insights and those kinds of solutions where you can still have accountability, but maybe it's for the licensing that's not going to end the world. Maybe a doctor proven you are more hesitant on, and maybe someone, more on like I'm not going to point out a license, an accountant, for example, that might mess up for a week, but then once everything gets verified, they're either kicked in or kicked out. Is it going to be the end of the world? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator Zolnikoff and Jennifer. Other questions from task force members? Aaron, your hand is raised.
I realize I'm not a task force member. We do have a question in the Q&A box for when you are ready to take that question. I can read it out if you don't have access to it.
Yeah, hey, if you'll do that for me, please.
Okay, just let me know when you're ready for that.
Shoot, go now. Nobody else is offering it.
Okay. So this is a question from the attendees. Based on the data mentioned, what is the primary reason for a license being denied?
Watch this. Jennifer, do you want to take that? In general, it's some prior disciplinary issue or some underlying criminal conviction where rehabilitation has not been realized. Do I have that right, Jennifer?
You sure do. And I think maybe you should point out license applications are good for 1 year, and they do time out if we don't get the information we need. So I would suggest, and I'll punt this back to Kevin, that far more of them time out than are actually denied.
I would agree with that, yes. There's always been thought given to, do we need to just set a specific time frame for license applications because maybe that will make somebody complete their application quicker. The problem is usually we run into individual life circumstances, but it does obviously skew the numbers. So anytime you as task force members or the public are looking at time to licensure numbers, you're really going to run into folks that, again, I think I testified to this last session, that have watched Yellowstone that live in Gainesville, Florida, no offense, although I do hate the Gators, have applied to Montana because they'd love to move to Montana because they watched Yellowstone, but then sit on their application for 233 days and don't do anything. So it's that time to licensure data is a little bit skewed. Just keep that as a caveat. There's different ways we can pull that to make sure that you as task force members are getting the best information possible. Again, I think we hover around 40 to 45 days for our current licenses. Let's see some more task force members with hands raised. Sierra, go right ahead.
Hi, yes. Quick question about fingerprints. Does someone have to get fingerprinted potentially multiple times? For example, like if the application does time out and they did complete the fingerprints, do they have to then complete it again, or are they stored somewhere? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. Department of Justice really hates when we store things. So they're all inside that locked computer database. But in general, we are not requiring additional fingerprinting as long as the last set of fingerprints were in the last 6 months. So that's the time frame that we work with right now. If somebody's application were to time out, or we frequently see it with, I'll use private security as an example. Somebody applies to be a security guard. They need to get fingerprinted for that. And then 3 months later, they realize, oh, I got to carry a firearm. Well, you have to get an endorsement for that. We just use the same set of fingerprints as long as it's within the last 6 months. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. And is the 6 months a state requirement or is that a federal standard?
That's a process that we have internally.
It, my
Go ahead.
apologies, Kevin. It is in board rule, at least was in board rule for the Board of Behavioral Health.
Thank
So
you.
I'm unsure if it's in other board rules, but relevant to Ms. Reesberg's position, it is in rule for the Board of Behavioral Health.
Thank you.
Glad the lawyers are here. Senator Nolan.
Thank you, Senator Nolan. I just wanted to put a comment out there. So when we are communicating and others are communicating with you, wonderful, hardworking, dedicated servants, which we greatly appreciate, we need to probably put somewhere in there the best times to reach, because I've called and don't reach somebody, get on hold, and in some offices say, if you want to reach this for this reason, licensing or whatever you're trying to do, best times to call. Best is to email. Best is to, whatever the issue is. Just quickly, because I spent a lot of time just on hold. And I've had other people call, say, we want to do this license, but we can't get through to them. I'm not really, I hate to say I don't believe that, but they just get tired of waiting just like I do. So when you guys are doing that, and I know some of you have, this is the best way to reach us is do our website. Great. But some people want to talk to somebody. So if they want to say, if you are needing to, or feel like you need to talk to someone, 8 o'clock in the morning is the best time. Just give us some of that. But you guys are doing great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Nolan. One of the big things that we've pushed over the last several years is being customer centric, and picking up the phone is certainly a part of that. So we appreciate that recommendation. Jen, go right ahead.
Hey, Kevin, thanks. Sorry to ask two questions here before everybody's had a chance to ask one. I believe at the very first meeting, when you mentioned the days to licensure, and then again today, you mentioned that there were a few outliers that sometimes skew those numbers. I think I asked for if you had different ways to look at that data with maybe those outliers reviewed or removed, or by profession, or in different ways to look at the data. If you've already sent this out to us, I apologize if I've missed it, but is there a way we could get that data so we can figure out what's really the date to real licensure versus somebody that has maybe twice in a row sat on something for 6 months?
Yeah, great observation. I think Aaron's continuing to compile that, and we'll hope to have that to you soon. It's always a debate about where to cut off the day, but running it in different quarters or maybe half-year increments is something that we could look at. but I appreciate that. We'll
Thank
get you that
you.
information. Yeah, absolutely. Sierra, I see your hand still raised.
Yes, hi, thank you again.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you can clarify for me, is the are there two separate processes happening with professional license and credentialing and background checks, fingerprinting, and then to become to enroll as a provider for Medicaid, an organization might then also have to do background checks and fingerprinting. I think those are two separate processes, but if you can clarify or confirm, that'd be helpful.
Yes, those are separate and distinct processes.
Okay.
I think the council has talked about, or I think maybe it was at the kickoff meeting, Representative Buttry talked about credentialing. Those are currently separate processes. I don't want to get too far down into the weeds, but that may be something for the task force to look at to see if there can be some collaboration on that. But sharing of information is always a dicey topic.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions from, yes, Webb.
Get off mute here. Sorry. Webb Brown, Montana Dental Association, trying to remember to do that. And I would be remiss too if I didn't say, I think you folks are doing a good job. I talked to my peers in other states, and quite frankly, they're surprised that our process is faster than theirs in most cases. So we've had a few hiccups, absolutely, from time to time, and you're right. In many cases, it is the applicant themselves who is maybe not providing something or is not doing a follow-up as well. But I just wanted to make note. I think Montana and the staff do a very good job. So to your credit, yeah, maybe some tweaks on the way, but it sounds like you're doing a good job on all of this, and we appreciate the presentation again. Thanks.
Thanks, Webb. Compliments always welcome, and I'll pass those along to staff too. I do very little here. My staff is the workhorse, so I really appreciate their hard work. All right, I don't see any more task force member hands raised. Are there members of the public that would like to have questions? Or Aaron, do you have something? Is there chat? There's too many notifications on my screen.
Yes, so one more question came through the chat before we can go to the public asking questions. So if the public wants to go ahead and start raising your hands, we can call on you. In the meantime, a question came through. Are provisional licenses issued for the apprenticeship program, such as barber cosmetology, after the program is completed? And then secondly, is there a central website or page for apprenticeship updates, meeting notices, or rule changes that applicants as well as the sponsors can check regularly?
Well, that's like several questions, but I'll get to each of them, I promise you. For a provisional license after somebody completes an apprenticeship, House Bill 336 in the last legislative session, and again, thank you to our legislators, authorized that. If you complete your apprenticeship, I don't recall the specific Board of Barbers and Cosmetology rules. They just recently did those. However, if you are eligible at that point to apply, once you've completed the apprenticeship, you would be eligible for a provisional license through the board. That provisional license, which again is something that we aligned in the last legislative session, is subject to specific limitations from the boards themselves. And I cannot recall what the Board of Barbers and Cosmetology specifically has as far as a limitation for provisional licenses. But certainly happy to get that information offline, or you're welcome to reach out to me and we'll make sure we get the question answered. And then what was the second one about rule updates?
If there's a central website or page for apprenticeship updates, meeting notices, and rule changes. So yeah.
Yeah.
Also specific to the barber and cosmetology program or just apprenticeships in general.
So for apprenticeships in general, that's one of our sister divisions here at the Department of Labor and Industry. We have a wide swath of things that we do. It's not just licensing, believe it or not. That's our Workforce Services division. And Crystal Armstrong, I am sure, as well as Glenn Disk, have a specific update website for apprenticeships. the best thing to do as far as for licensing and opening up the scope of apprenticeships is to, again, sign up for our interested parties list. You can do that on our main DLI website, or just type in Google DLI interested parties. If you sign up for that, you're going to get notifications of when rules are being discussed at board meetings, as well as more information when we're doing some stakeholder outreach. Jennifer, I see your hand raised.
The apprenticeship website for the state is apprenticeship.mt.gov.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So Kevin, I don't see anybody, any attendees that have raised their hand.
Okay. Well, at the risk of cutting things off too quickly, although we're at the hour time, you are welcome to reach out to me at the department at any time. Again, my information, I'll put it back up on the screen and we can leave with that. It's right there on the screen. Reach out to me at any time with questions or data that you may be requesting. We're happy to accommodate what we can, specifically for task force members. We will try and expedite those requirements. But reach out to me anytime. I appreciate the positive comments about our staff. They're always welcome. Thank you for sharing those with us. We look forward to what the task force is going to be able to do for us across the entire state, not just here at the department, and certainly appreciate the time that you are all giving to us. And so with that, I will close out the Licensing 101 webinar with a pitch for you to come and see Quinlan next week at noon. I think that's the 11th, if I can do my math correctly. And then on the 18th, that's going to be with Glenn Disk from our apprenticeship program. Again, thank you so much for taking your time today, and please feel free to reach out whenever you need help. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.